and stopped again. This is not good. I promised Harry I'd be the photographer at his wedding. I can't be late. Once again, the city is overrun with tourists. Once again, they're causing traffic jams. Holly grumbled, drumming her fingers on the steering wheel. In one of the cars, Holly noticed a handsome man. He looked like a celebrity. It even seemed to her that he was familiar to her. She had seen him somewhere before. Suddenly, the driver of one of the cars decided to make a risky maneuver on the road. Jumping out from behind the corner, the truck at breakneck speed began to bear down directly on Holly's car. "No, what's he doing? I'm going to die!" The girl wailed fearfully. Holly felt pain all over her body. She was constantly thrown from hot to cold. The girl opened her eyes and studied her surroundings. Holly woke up in a place unknown to her. The floor was covered with marble tiles. There were white walls everywhere. Rising to her feet, the girl hurried to find a way out. Running out of the room into the hallway, Holly realized she was in a hospital. A gurney was being wheeled past her by the doctors at high speed. On it lay a man. Right. This is a hospital. If I understand correctly, all this chaos is happening because of the accident on the road. I remember a truck suddenly jumped out of somewhere. I was probably brought here by an ambulance. Unfortunately, I don't remember anything else. Holly thought. Holly decided to go to the girl who was sitting at the front desk and ask her for more details. "Excuse me, can you tell me if a girl named Holly Brown was admitted after the accident?" Holly asked, but the girl at the front desk ignored her question. The girl at the front desk picked up some kind of form and rose from her seat and walked through Holly. "What the hell? What just happened? Is this all a dream? This doesn't happen in real life, does it?" mumbled Holly. Holly decided to explore the hospital to see what really happened. The girl entered the emergency room. There, the doctors were fighting for some man's life. "Doctor, central venous and blood pressure is dropping. She's gone from shock to semi-coma. I suggest we give her a loading dose. She's also suspected of having a stroke. We need to do a CT scan," shouted one of the doctors. Suddenly, Holly realized that the doctors were leaning over her body. Holly jumped out of the hospital and raced toward the parking lot. In the hallway, the girl ran into the man she had seen earlier in traffic before the accident. "Who are you?" In a quiet whisper, the girl asked. Holly was very fond of taking pictures. The sound the camera shutter made seemed magical to the girl. Someone had once said that it was the exact moment a moment in life was preserved for eternity. "How's Charlie?" her friend Margaret asked Holly. "How would I know? I mean, he and I broke up. He calls me sometimes when he's drunk, starts apologizing right away. Says everything that happened was just a mistake. Says he wants to come back to town for Harry's wedding," answered Holly. "So what do you decide to do? Forgive him and put everything back the way it was?" asked Margaret. Holly didn't answer her friend anything. She didn't know what she should do next. "Holly, I want to turn the studio over to one of my acquaintances. You know him. This is Simon Zion. To be honest, I've been thinking about it for a long time. I want to spend more time studying," Margaret said unexpectedly. "Don't you think it's unfair to just put me on the spot like that? Why didn't you want to discuss this with me a little earlier?" resented Holly. "You can keep working here if you want. I've already made arrangements with Simon. You and he get on well, so I don't think there'll be any problems. When things settle down, you'll even get some of the stock," Margaret replied. "And I thought you and I were partners. I guess I was wrong. I don't think this conversation is going to end in anything but a fight. I don't know what you've got going on, but I need some time to think it over," said Holly. "I'll be leaving early today." Holly picked up her bag and walked out of the photo studio. "My dear Holly, you are now the owner. I won this building at auction. It's yours now. You have no idea how much effort it cost me," Mrs. Brown exclaimed. "Mom, what are you talking about now? What building?" asked Holly. "Come on in. Don't be shy. I'll tell you all about it now." Mrs. Brown opened the wicket gate and invited her daughter to come into the yard. As Holly entered the yard, she saw a small 2-story building. "Look at that! There's even a well! The backyard was even bigger than I thought it would be," Mrs. Brown exclaimed. Standing next to the house, Holly had a rather strange, unpleasant feeling. For some reason, she felt extremely uncomfortable here. I suggest we tear down this old building and build a new one. It's great that my nephew is studying to be an architect after all. He will definitely help us come up with something interesting, said Mrs. Brown. I'm not surprised the bid was outbid 18 times. The energy of this place is just something with something. I can't believe my aunt pulled this off, said Aiden, entering the building. Holly was surprised that her cousin believed various tales about strange houses. My mom went to a shaman once, and he told her that this land used to belong to a goblin. That's why everyone who lived here was bound to get sick with something serious or just go crazy, said Holly in a sinister tone and laughed loudly. You're laughing for nothing. Pay attention to this inscription. It says that this building was built in 1939, which means the house was built during the Japanese occupation, said Aiden. Although I'm trying to make a joke, Aiden is right. I felt something strange when I saw this building for the first time, too. Thought Holly. Aiden, do you think it would be possible to restore this building? Maybe not completely, but at least partially? Asked Holly to her cousin. She didn't want to ruin such a historic building. A few days later, Aiden called Holly and asked her to come over. It turned out that when he was tearing down one of the walls of the building, he had discovered a secret closet in the wall. There on one of the shelves was a box. This box is sealed, and the addressee is written on the lid. It was probably meant to be sent to someone, but something didn't go according to plan, said Aiden. The name written on the box was Holly Foote. Holly took a stationery knife and carefully opened the box. Smoke immediately came out of the box. Did you see that? Smoke came out of the box. How is that possible? It's been here for decades, Holly exclaimed. Aiden hurried to reassure the girl. He said she was just imagining things. In the box, Holly found an antique camera and folders of records. It turned out that the building used to be a French photography studio. Several pictures of different people were found in the box. Holly was especially interested in the pictures of a girl in a hat and a handsome man. Holly decided to keep these pictures. I wonder who the man was. He has very sad eyes in the picture. What happened in his life? Mumbled Holly. Looking at the man standing in front of her, Holly remembered seeing him in a photograph she had found in a box in a French photo studio. But why was he here? Could he be a ghost or something? Please spare me. It's too soon for me to die, Holly screamed. Tears streamed down her cheeks. The horror of what was happening slowly began to dawn on her. The man reached out and wiped the tears from the girl's eyes. You're alive, thank God, the man said in a quiet voice. I'm sorry, of course, but I have absolutely no memory of you. Who are you? Asked Holly. I have absolutely no memory of my name. When I opened my eyes, I saw you. The only thing I remember is that I saw you in a dream, though it was hardly a dream, mumbled the man. Holly told him that she had been in a car accident. Her body was now lying in the intensive care unit, most likely dying. Suddenly, one of the nurses walked through the man. If you and I were in an accident together, what's going on now? What are we doing here? The man asked thoughtfully. I've seen something like this before in movies, where people would turn into spirits before they died and wander around the hospital, said Holly. Suddenly, the girl heard someone calling her name loudly. Turning around, she saw her mother and her cousin Aiden. Holly started calling her mother's name, but she didn't hear her. Doctor, how is my daughter? Mrs. Brown asked. She needs emergency surgery. In addition to multiple fractures, she has a ruptured heart and spleen, replied the doctor. Mrs. Brown had been sitting outside the operating room for hours. All this time, Holly had been watching her mother. The girl felt sorry for her, but there was nothing she could do to help. Where have you been all this time? Holly asked the man who approached her. He answered her that he had been looking for his body, but it was nowhere to be found. You still don't remember anything? No, I remember absolutely nothing, but I am firmly convinced that I am dead or in the process of dying, replied the man. A surgeon came out of the operating room. He told Mrs. Brown who they had successfully stitched up the lacerations on the spleen. Fortunately, there was no damage to the nervous system. But it was unlikely Holly would survive without a heart transplant. "But I can feel my heart beating," Holly exclaimed. "It's probably just a materialization of your thoughts. Close your eyes now and think about the place where you found yourself for the first time," asked the man. Holly clenched her eyes tightly. A moment later, she felt a slight breeze on her face. When Holly opened her eyes again, she realized she was next to the front desk. "It seems we can travel to places we remember. I'm beginning to think we are a residual picture of our consciousness. We can't touch anything, and it's even possible that all these objects are figments of our imagination," said the man. "But if that's true, then if we die, our consciousnesses will disappear with us." Holly guessed. Holly heard someone's alarmed scream. The girl turned around at the sound. "Charlie, what's wrong with you? It wasn't my fault Holly had an accident," shouted Margaret. "I knew those two were meeting behind my back," said Holly in a sad voice. The girl remembered Charlie apologizing to her, calling his cheating a simple mistake. At that moment, the girl didn't know who her boyfriend had cheated on her with. Now, it was clear to her. He was secretly dating her friend. "Do you know them? They seem to be looking for you. Do they know you?" the man asked Holly. "Yes, that's my ex-boyfriend and my best friend, but she probably falls under the X category too," answered Holly. Holly decided to go outside. It was raining a dreary rain, matching her mood. "Do you want to go for a walk in the rain? Maybe it'll be our last rain. How do you like my idea?" Holly asked the man. "To be honest, I don't like getting wet in the rain," replied the man. "Well, you'll have to!" Holly exclaimed and pulled the man out into the dreary rain. "Look at this. We've been standing in the rain for minutes, but there's no way we're getting wet. This is amazing. Do you think it's just part of our consciousness, too?" The man put his face to the raindrops. They, like people, passed through him. Watching the man, Holly thought about how absolutely everything about him was beautiful, even the fingers on his hands. "Have you ever played the piano?" asked Holly. "Maybe, but I don't remember it. The only thing I remember is just one tune," replied the man. "And what was that tune? Try to remember where you heard it and who you used to listen to it with," asked Holly. "Since the tune is quite romantic, I think I listened to it with a woman. I remember her smile. It was beautiful," said the man. "You remembered the woman?" inquired Holly. "Come on, I was kidding. I don't remember anything as before. I don't remember any woman. However, I do remember Schubert's Serenade." Smiling, the man replied, "Schubert was a favorite of my late father, and I like that composer too, to be honest. By the way, I want to confess to you that I saw you not only on the highway, or rather not you, but a picture of you." Holly confessed. "I'm a photographer, and I happened to find a picture of you in my studio." "I want to see your work and my picture. Show them to me," the man asked. With a thought, Holly moved into her studio. She led the man to a box she had found. "This is the first camera with a timer. At one time it cost as much as this house. I used to work here. My name is Carlos Hidi," said the man, picking up the camera. "I remembered your name. Your name is Holly Foote." The man walked over to the girl and kissed her gently on the lips. "I know him, or rather, I knew him, a long time ago, back in a past life." Holly thought for a moment that she had crossed paths with this man before, and more than once. He was like family to her. Holly Foote was an ordinary girl from an ordinary family. Her life was not easy, but the girl always hoped for the best. The turning point was her marriage to Gunnar. "My faithful wife, what is your most cherished dream? For example, wouldn't you like to be someone?" the man asked. "I want to be a good mother and a faithful wife," answered Holly. "Listen, you're awfully submissive. Answer me one question. Why did you marry someone you're seeing for the first time?" asked Gunnar. "I want to make my parents happy," replied the girl. "Huh? Your parents? They passed away a long time ago and you're still following their will? Were you brought here from some village? What century are you living in?" the man asked and laughed loudly. "Do you know that your country has been destroyed? Of course I know about it. That day my grandfather committed suicide as he could not survive the shame. Now you answer my question. Why did you decide to marry someone you had never seen before? Asked the girl. Holly knew that Gunnar was quite popular with women. She really hoped that he would refuse to get married after all. The girl was surprised that he agreed to the marriage very easily. It was the only chance I had to go abroad to study, replied Gunnar. Holly had often been told that if she lived happily with her husband, she was sure to meet him again in the next life. Looking at the man sitting across from her, the girl realized that it was unlikely they would live a happy life. I thought you would be more out of control. It's silly to make such important decisions for such a reason, said Holly. How dare you say such a thing? Look at you! You're all wrapped up in layers of old-fashioned clothes, shouted the man. Gunnar snatched her favorite cape out of Holly's hands and ripped it to shreds. You'll never be a good wife or mother. There's no way I'm putting those kind of shackles on me, said Gunnar, and left the room. How are you feeling? You still have a fever. Alexa put her hand to Holly's forehead. You were handed these lovely yellow daffodils. There's a note enclosed. Alexa held out a bouquet of brightly colored flowers to Holly. I understand these flowers are from the young gentleman. How nice of him. He's very shy, as he's still quite young, but thoughtful enough to give you flowers. Still, I think he shouldn't care for you at the moment, though I must have blurted something unnecessary. Forgive me for that. Holly knew Carlos's mother very well. The woman had always been kind to the girl. When Holly's parents passed away, she took the girl in with her. Holly considered Mrs. Hetty her second mother and her son, Carlos, her little brother. Mistress, did you like these flowers? Asked Alexa. They are beautiful. By the way, I should probably still check on the elderly Mrs. Hart tomorrow. I can't keep putting it off, said Holly. You're sick all the time. How are you even going to give birth with that figure? Asked Mrs. Hart in a grumpy, disgruntled tone. I'm sorry, mumbled Holly. I've already looked at you, so you can go. I wanted to throw a lavish wedding for my grandson and invited a lot of people, but my plans aren't going to come to fruition. I'm sorry you had to go through this suffering without your husband, said Mrs. Hart. You have already done enough to feel my regard for you. There is no need for you to visit me anymore. Don't come again unless I call for you. For coming to see me today, take this. The woman tossed a small bag at Holly's feet. It was also the day Holly decided to visit Mrs. Hetty. Don't fidget, sit still. By the way, you could trim your nails yourself. Why do you keep asking me to do that? Said Mrs. Heidi to her son. Madam, welcome back. Why don't you come in? Asked the maid to Holly. Noticing the girl, Carlos looked away, embarrassed. Holly, you're so thin. Are you feeling better yet? Why are your hands so cold? Mrs. Hetty asked, taking the girl's hands. Carlos, don't just stand there. Go say hello to Holly, shouted the woman to her son. A blushing Carlos walked over to Holly and bowed to the girl in a welcoming gesture. Holly thanked the boy for the gift. My son sent you flowers? So you did that? And here I was wondering where all the daffodils disappeared from my garden, Mrs. Hetty exclaimed. I have to excuse myself. I'm in a hurry to get to school, said Carlos. Sure, go. But don't get carried away catching frogs after school. Go straight home, shouted Mrs. Hetty to her son. Holly, I wanted to ask you something. Please give Gunnar some time. I know he's always missing, but I want to assure you that he has a very good heart. Don't hold it against him. He will soon realize what a beautiful wife he has, Mrs. Heidi assured the girl. Holly waited for Carlos to come home from school. She wanted to ask him a few questions. Carlos, how's school going? By the way, that poem, did you write it yourself? Why do you ask that? Carlos asked. Because she's beautiful. I liked her a lot, Holly admitted. This poem was written by Christina Rossetti. She is originally from England, replied Carlos. The girl asked if he had any other works by the writer. Yes, I have several of her works. I'm in the process of translating her poems into Korean. When I'm done, I'll be sure to show them to you, replied Carlos. Gunnar didn't return home until 2 weeks later. Here are the foods your husband likes. Mrs. Heidi brought them. Alexa held out a tray of food to Holly. Holly took the tray and carried it to her husband's room. As she approached the terrace, Holly saw her spouse in the company of some girl. Suddenly, the girl gently touched Gunner's face. Noticing that Holly was looking at them, the girl kissed Gunner on the lips. From surprise, Holly dropped the tray from her hands. "Gunner, who's that?" asked the girl. Sighing heavily, Gunner replied that it was his consort. "And since you did run into each other, I'll have to explain who's in front of you. Holly, I'd like you to meet my mistress, Alicia Prats. She took a French course in Tokyo, and she's just returned. I want to warn you that she and I will be leaving soon." Alicia rose from her seat and walked over to Holly. "Just please don't be jealous of me. I'm one of your husband's many mistresses. If you want to be near him, you're going to have to put up with those." "I don't want to hear about my husband's mistresses," said Holly. "That's a good thing. An elegant lady like you shouldn't trouble yourself with vulgarities. My relationship with your husband is quite simple. He indulges his desires, and I simply want his money," Alicia confessed. "What's going on here? Does grandmother know about what you are doing? How can you do this in your own home?" screamed Carlos. He had heard a rumor that Gunner had brought his mistress into the house, not at all embarrassed by his spouse. "Don't interfere when grown-ups are talking," Gunner said in a calm voice. "You're such a bastard," Carlos hissed through his teeth. Gunner walked up to Carlos and punched him in the face with his fist. "Cheeky little man? How dare you say that?" Gunner asked in an angry tone. "Carlos, how are you?" Holly asked in an agitated voice. "How could I have a heart-to-heart talk with a man like that?" thought Holly, looking at her husband. "Why are you looking at me like that? Do I seem crazy in your eyes?" asked Gunner to his spouse. "Answer me! Why do you look at me like that?" Gunner walked over to his consort and grabbed her by the scruff of the neck. "Get your hands off her!" screamed Carlos. Gunner ran up to Carlos and slapped him across the face again. "You little asshole! Who gave you the right to talk to me like that?" shouted Gunner. "That's enough! Stop it! I understand you perfectly well, so stop!" Holly covered Carlos with herself. Holly helped Carlos up off the ground and led him to her room. "Goodness, mistress, what happened to young master?" Alexa exclaimed. "It's fine. Don't worry about it. Carlos just had an unfortunate fall. Can you please bring me some medicine and a bowl of water?" asked Holly of the maid. "Carlos, you shouldn't have been so rude to your big brother after all." Holly began to gently wipe the wounds on Carlos's face. "He's horrible. He deserves to be treated like that," replied Carlos. "But you did get a little cocky. Why did you get into adult business?" asked the girl. "I'm not that little. I'm only 4 years younger than you," replied Carlos. "But it's not about age, is it? I'm already married, so I'm considered an adult. Give me your hands, I'll treat your wounds," asked Holly. Carlos held out his wounded palms to the girl. "What beautiful hands you have after all," noted Holly. Embarrassed, Carlos pulled his hands away. "Young master, what's wrong with you? You're all red. Are you feeling all right? He must be embarrassed that he tripped right in front of you," Alexa exclaimed as she approached. "Nothing like that. I'm just hurt," said a crimson-red Carlos. "Give me your hands. I'm not done yet," said Holly. After the wounds on Carlos's arm were treated, Holly bandaged them with a handkerchief she had specially embroidered for Carlos. "I was going to give it to you a little later, but so be it. I hope you like it," said the girl. "Did you embroider my name on it?" asked Carlos. "Yes, I associate your name with tranquility," answered Holly. "Even though I was born in hard times, my father always wanted me to live a quiet and peaceful life," narrated Carlos. "I remember your father. After my parents died, he treated me like his own daughter. After living under the same roof with you for a few years, I began to see you as my little brother," said Holly. "It doesn't work that way. You're not my sister. We may be similar in personality, but we are not related," objected Carlos. "So you don't like me?" asked Holly. "I don't. I just don't want people to think you and I are related. We can't be brother and sister with you," exclaimed Carlos. "Huh, yeah, I get it. I just wanted to make a joke on myself," said the girl and laughed out loud. "By the way, I came here for a reason. I translated another poem by Rossetti. I wanted to read it to you." Carlos pulled a folded piece of paper from his breast pocket. "The title of the poem is Whoever Saw the Wind," said Carlos and began to read the poem. It's a beautiful poem, isn't it? Somehow it seems to me that Rossetti wrote it on a clear day like this. After all, there are happy days in even the bitterest life, don't you think? Holly asked when Carlos finished reading the poem. Carlos looked up at the sky. It was a clear summer day. The next morning, upon seeing his brother, Carlos bowed low before him. You'd better not get attached to this place. You don't want to stay here for the rest of your life, do you? On top of that, I hear you'll be leaving here soon. I'm sure you owe it to yourself to see the big world, said Gunnar. You shouldn't live in this fading world. That's advice for you from your big brother. Think about it. I heard Mom tell you that you would never go abroad until you were married. Is that why you did that? But since you're already married, be more courteous to your wife, Carlos exclaimed. You're letting yourself talk sassy to me again. Whatever you feel about that girl, don't forget one thing. There is no future in this country, and especially not in this house, replied Gunnar to his brother. A few days later, Gunnar and his mistress Alicia left the estate. They left to study in Tokyo. Carlos decided to take Holly and her maid Alexa to a local cafe. The place had brought in appetizers straight from the West. Ma'am, look at this. The local female students are stopping by this cafe. Somehow I think they're interested in Carlos, whispered Alexa in Holly's ear. One of the female students entered the cafe and handed Carlos a folded piece of paper. The young gentleman is extremely popular, said Alexa and laughed softly. That's not true at all, Carlos exclaimed. Oh, don't be shy. There's no shame in girls liking you, said Holly. Holly, do you happen to know what kind of music is playing in this cafe right now? Asked Carlos. It's Schubert. I think the piece is called Serenade, answered Holly. Suddenly, tears ran down the girl's cheeks. My God, ma'am, what's wrong? Why are you crying? Asked Alexa. Don't worry, they are tears of admiration. This music is really beautiful, answered Holly and wiped the tears from her eyes. Carlos held out an embroidered handkerchief to the girl. Holly, there is a gramophone in the guest house. There are records of waltz music, concert records, and even Schubert. You can listen to those records whenever you want, and as much as you want. How about we listen together sometime? Holly suggested. I don't understand why you didn't make a scene. I heard a rumor about the mistress my grandson brought in. She had the nerve to come to the main house. Young people are very dissolute these days, after all. Mrs. Hart was indignant. I also heard that Gunnar is leaving for university soon. He hasn't shown his face at home in months. You and his mother are the same. Soft-bodied like tofu. She was too nice to him. That's why he grew up so sassy. I don't think Miss Hetty is guilty of anything. Bringing a mistress into the house was Gunnar's decision after all. Holly objected. Maybe you're right. The problem is always that men like to take advantage of a woman's kindness. He asks for money every 3 days. I've already sent him so much money that I could set up a small village for it, grumbled Mrs. Hart. If his mother hadn't begged me, I would have disowned him long ago. By the way, I also heard a rumor that you and Carlos went to town the day before yesterday. Is that true? Yes, we walked around town a bit and stopped at a little cafe. They had some delicious cakes in there. We also saw some fireworks. You know, he's like a little brother to me. He has the same kind heart as his mother, answered Holly. That's why I'm worried about him. He's too kind and always wants to help others. He's idealistic and wants to make our town a better place. Also, I want to warn you that you have taken on too heavy a burden, said Mrs. Hart. If you're talking about my job, you don't have to worry. I enjoy it. I relax when I sort the ledgers. With a smile, Holly replied, You're a strange child. It gives everyone else a headache, and you love it. It's not surprising, though, since your family raised a minister at one time. By the way, aren't you curious as to where I got this fortune? Mrs. Hart asked. You've already noticed that it's quite large. It even allows you to cover Gunnar's excessive expenses. How do you think we were able to make so much money in such turbulent times? I'll answer you. We simply betrayed our homeland. This fortune was obtained by my father by selling his country. That's why I want you to take care of the finances. You're very loyal and responsible. You wouldn't betray anyone. An excited servant burst into the room. He announced that an urgent letter had arrived from Tokyo. What's happened already? You know I'm not buying it a second time. If Gunnar asks for money again, I'll refuse him, Mrs. Hart exclaimed. There's a telegram from Alicia Pratt's. She asks that someone be sent to Tokyo at once. Gunnar is seriously ill, narrated the servant. I beg you not to call me Holly Foote, asked the girl to the man standing across from her. My name is Holly Brown. And what are you? Are you a ghost? Or are you death itself in the form of a man? My name is Carlos Hiddy. Your name is Holly Foote. After you got married, you became Holly Hiddy, the man explained. That can't be right. The records that were lying next to the camera indicated that Carlos Hiddy was born in 1913. He's already dead. Are you his ghost? Holly asked. Entering the estate courtyard, Carlos announced to his family in a sad voice that his brother Gunnar Hiddy was dead. Mrs. Hart fainted. Carlos watched Holly's actions. She took the news of her husband's death rather calmly. The girl appeared to be quite strong. I wonder what she's thinking right now. Why isn't she crying? The feelings I have for her are immoral. Since when did I start looking in her direction? Since when did I become jealous of my own brother? Carrying a tray of tea, Holly suddenly staggered. Carlos ran over to her and picked her up under her arms so she wouldn't fall. Carlos inquired how the girl was feeling. I'm fine. Thanks for your help. I just got dizzy, that's all. It's awkward for you to see me like this, said Holly. Are you going back to your hometown? I overheard Mom and Grandma talking by accident. They want to send you back to your family. Will you go, or will you still insist on staying here? Carlos asked. Do you want me to stay here? Asked Holly. That should have nothing to do with me wanting to, replied Carlos. You're right. It has nothing to do with you, said Holly. Carlos took the tea tray from Holly and carried it to his mother and grandmother. A few days later, Mrs. Hart's condition worsened. The doctors claimed she had only a few days to live. Mom, first Gunnar, and now you. What are we going to do now? Crying tears, Mrs. Hiddy mumbled. The next day, Mrs. Hiddy invited Holly into her office. My mother, after Gunnar died, suggested we have another wedding. She also wanted to send you back to your hometown, said Mrs. Hiddy. As he walked past the ajar door of the study, Carlos heard his mother's words. I can't keep you near me forever. You're only 22 years old. You need to build a new family. You can't be a widow all your life. You need to think about a new marriage now. You know how hard it is for a woman alone. I didn't get married because I had a sick mother and children. I don't want you to live the same life. And I won't keep you by my side because of my selfishness. We want to marry you off to a doctor from a neighboring village. That doctor is quite a decent man. His wife died of an illness recently. Fortunately, he still doesn't have any children. The only downside, he's much older than you. Holly, come out into the yard for a minute. I have something to tell you, exclaimed Carlos, bursting into his mother's office. Holly knew that the subject of Carlos's marriage had also come up recently, but he had disliked it so much that he had become scandalized. He was even pissed off at the fact that his in-laws had been looking for a bride for some time now. Carlos, what do you want to tell me? Holly asked. Don't go. Let's run away from here with you somewhere very far away. I must be crazy, right? Carlos wanted to say, but he didn't have the courage. My fingernails have grown back a lot. My mother has aged a lot in these few years. She started cutting her skin instead of her nails, said Carlos. And that's why you burst into your mother's office with such a flustered look? I thought you were an adult, and you're still a kid, said Holly and laughed ringingly. Sure, I'll trim your nails for you. Have a seat. I'll be right back with the manicure supplies. I'll never stop envying your long and beautiful fingers. But Carlos, how long are you going to ask your mom to trim your nails? You're an adult. I even heard you're getting married soon. Are you going to ask your wife to do that later? I think I'm losing my mind over you, Holly, Carlos blurted out unexpectedly. No, I don't want to hear that. Ask your mom to reach your nails and never come to the main house again, asked Holly and ran off to her room. Young Mr. Carlos hasn't come here in days. I wonder what he's been up to. Alexa said thoughtfully. He's probably studying for his entrance exams. He doesn't have time to come visit us, said Holly. I heard that he was studying for a very long time for the sake of getting into the local university, but then he changed his mind abruptly. He wants to go abroad. There's a rumor that he's going to study in France. I wonder how far is that from here? Asked Alexa. Walking through the garden, Holly bumped into Carlos. Holly, what are you doing here? Asked Carlos. I am well aware that Gunnar is your half-brother. You have the same father but different mothers. I've also been told that his late mother lived there somewhere. Sometimes I get the idea that the cause of his anxiety was just plain fear, said Holly. Everyone knows that Gunnar's mother went insane and hanged herself in her own room. I think Gunnar was afraid of becoming insane, so he was constantly looking for himself, wandering the world. Why did you come here? Carlos asked. It's quiet here, so when I'm anxious I come here. And why are you here at this early hour? Inquired Holly. I come here when I want to sort myself out. At the moment, I don't know what I really want. Being here makes me realize what my true desire is. I hope that this time I can find the answers to all the questions I'm looking for, replied Carlos. And when did that happen? At what point did he start looking at me with the eyes of a man? Holly thought to herself. The girl turned around and hurried away. She was afraid that Carlos would start confessing his feelings to her again. Suddenly, Holly tripped over a rock and fell to the ground. Bear with me for a while. I need to look at what happened to your foot. Carlos carefully removed the shoe from the girl's foot. Carlos finally found his body. There were several people gathered near his bed. What's the worst-case scenario? Asked an elderly man to the doctor. The man told him that brain death was a possibility. There's a good chance he'll spend the rest of his life in a vegetative state. Back, honey! The elderly woman exclaimed and cried bitterly. I remembered. In this life, my name is Baek Danam. I am the heir to the Yusan Company. These elderly people were my parents. Thought to himself Carlos. I've looked into it. Your name is really Holly Brown, and I'm Beck Dunham, Carlos told the girl. I'm glad your memories are finally coming back to you. But why do you keep claiming to be Carlos Heedy? Do you have a split personality? Or do you have the memories of two people? Holly asked. The more I am here, the more I am convinced that I was Carlos Heedy in my first life and then reborn as Beck Danam, replied Carlos. Do you have any idea what you're talking about right now and how you make it sound in my head? Exclaimed Holly. I remember my first life perfectly. I know for a fact that you were my older brother's spouse, but it all started when I saw you in a dream. There you were walking in a field and you always had your back to me. You wouldn't turn around no matter how many times I called out to you, narrated Carlos. Narrated. I dreamed about you for 3 months. I saw you almost every night. I remembered you the moment I caught a glimpse of you on the highway. I don't think it's coincidence. I think it's fate. When I touched that camera, memories from my first life came back to me, and I am now certain that I am the reincarnation of Carlos Heedy. You claim that I remind you of your brother's wife, a girl with the same name as me. Am I reading that right? Are you saying that I am her reincarnation? That sounds too crazy, Holly exclaimed, grabbing her head. Suddenly, the girl turned into smoke and vanished into thin air. This is all wrong, Holly exclaimed and ran barefoot into the house. Carlos went in search of Holly's body. He knew she was in intensive care. At the moment, her pulse is normal, but she can only be in that condition for a limited amount of time. If her heart stops again, you'd better be ready for it, said the doctor to Holly's mother. At this point, your daughter is unconscious, and we don't know if she will be able to regain consciousness. Rest assured, we are doing our best to save her. Carlos entered Holly's room. Carlos noticed a ribbon on the girl's arm. It listed her age and blood type. We have the same blood type, Carlos noted to himself. So, where are you now? Why did you disappear? It's been 2 days since you disappeared. How long do I have to wait for you? I don't want to lose you again. Please, don't go. In an instant, Carlos turned to smoke and vanished into thin air. You've been here the whole time? Carlos asked, walking up to the girl. I don't know. When I opened my eyes, I found myself here. At first, I felt so bad, like something was tearing me from the inside, but then the feeling stopped. How did you find me? The girl inquired. I don't know. I felt it, I guess, replied Carlos. Holly, tell me, what kind of person are you? You mean to tell me that it's me, and not your older brother's wife, that you're interested in at the moment? Well, I'm an ordinary girl from the most ordinary family. I'll be 30 years old soon. Holly began to tell her story. From early childhood, I've been inseparable with my cousin. Without him, I'm a pretty pathetic sight. According to my mother, I was a crybaby as a child. One day, my brother brought me a toy camera, saying it was his present. When I saw the camera, I was immediately fascinated by it. As you might guess, that's how I realized what I wanted to be in life. My first client was a child without 2 front teeth. He wanted to capture that moment. At that moment, I thought it would be nice to capture my whole life like that, not just a single moment. I started collecting a collection of moments from people's lives. I like it when the emotion is genuine. It's nostalgic. I know for a fact that that boy will grow up, get married, but he will still be the same in that photo. I've always wanted to create work that would make people smile, take them back in time. You make it sound like you're obsessed with your work, Carlos remarked. Obsessed? You know, and I've never thought of my work that way before, but you're probably right. I do enjoy what I do very much. What about you? What kind of person is Beck Dunham like? I had a pretty rough childhood. When I turned 5 years old, I was kidnapped. The culprit was a nanny taking care of me instead of my busy parents. Sometimes I felt like she was my mother. I loved her very much, even more than my parents. Can you imagine? I even sometimes thought I'd rather she was my mother, but one day I was disappointed in her. I found out that she had been my father's mistress for a long time. When my nanny kidnapped me and started demanding a ransom, my father said that having a new child wouldn't be a problem for him. How could he do that? He's your father! What about your nanny? Did she get caught? Asked Holly. She could see that her father's words still reverberated painfully in Carlos's heart. Yeah, you could say that. As soon as things didn't go according to plan, she slit my wrist and her own neck. After that sight, I hate the color red. And since that time, I don't trust anyone else, not even my parents. Carlos wiped the tears from his eyes with a quick motion. The girl noticed the scar on his arm. To comfort Carlos, Holly put her hand on his knee. And you know what else I remember is that Carlos, unlike Beck, was very kind. He was loved by a lot of people. At the moment, that thought puts me at ease. You know, and I think Beck is very kind too. He just needs to get over his childhood trauma. As long as you're alive, you can meet new people who will fill your life with kindness in the future, said Holly. Just like you? Clarified Carlos. If I had met you a little earlier, or gotten to know you sooner, it would have been wonderful. You're like spring sunshine to me. Carlos writes that he really misses his mother's food. He can't wait until he finally has a chance to come home, said Holly. Is that it? He doesn't write anything else? I'm wondering why he never asks how you're doing, asked Mrs. Hetty. Why should he remember me when he's in France? By the way, along with the letter, he gave you white gloves as well as face powder as a wedding present for Alexa. Holly replied, Holly, thank you for your work. After my mother died, a lot of the household chores fell on your shoulders, and forgive me for still not learning to read, said Mrs. Hetty. It's okay, I'm happy just to be around you, said the girl. Holly, what are you thinking about right now? What's bothering you? How much longer are you planning to deceive me? Thought Mrs. Heidi, looking at her sister-in-law sitting across from her. I can't believe he's gotten into gambling. Did he really lose all his money? And didn't his older brother's example teach him anything? He's not the Carlos I used to know. Holly thought to herself as she left her mother-in-law's office. He continues to keep everything a secret from his mother. He has already mortgaged the fields and invested the money in trading companies. What does he plan to do with all this? Is he studying or whatever he's doing? Holly reread the note Carlos had sent again. It asked the girl to go to the local fraternity and contact Maya Slot. What did he get himself into, after all? When the girl entered the bar, she was greeted by a short, dark-haired bartender. "I want to see Maya Slot," said Holly. The bartender shouted the girl's name somewhere in the back of the room. Sleepily rubbing her eyes, a dark-haired girl approached the bar. "Hello! What are you doing here? It's been so long since I've seen you. I'm glad you sent me a letter," Maya exclaimed upon seeing the girl. Holly stared at her in surprise. "Don't be surprised at anything and call me Maya," whispered the girl in Holly's ear. "So, what have we become here? Follow me." Maya led the girl into the dressing room. "So, her sister Carlos, huh? That's exactly how I pictured you. He's told me a lot about you. He said you reminded him of a narcissist. But anyway, I didn't expect you to come here in person. I'm even a little surprised. And what should I ask her first? Find out where Karloff invests his money?" Holly thought. "This is the gift Carlos asked me to give her." Holly laid a small bundle of items on the table. Untying the knot, Maya found their underwear and a note. "Maya, is this your new client? Who is she?" asked the girls who had gone. "You don't have to worry. This girl won't be working with us," replied Maya. "And what is that? Is it really lingerie from France? It's so beautiful!" exclaimed one of the girls, trying on the bra. "It's supposed to be worn on the chest!" Holly's mind flashed. The girl had never seen lingerie like this before. "My brother is going to start a company that will import goods here from Europe. You can take this lingerie and inflate the price several times over. He proposes to sell underwear, pantyhose, and powder," narrated Maya. "Things haven't been so great lately because of the war preparations, but now we're ready to work. I'll be helping my brother in sales. We'll be selling something that is very popular with our women. By the way, Carlos also asked me to give a letter to your brother." Holly held out a small envelope to Maya. Maya took hold of the envelope, but Holly wouldn't let go. "With your permission, I would like to give this letter to you personally," said Holly. "That will be quite difficult since my brother is out of town right now. When he will be back, I don't know. At the moment, my brother is in Shanghai," said Maya. "Grain prices have skyrocketed. The hoarding farmers have suffered. There was even a riot at the grain warehouse today," said Mr. Lionel. "What are you offering me? There isn't enough rice to distribute to everyone. You know yourself that the Japanese didn't leave us a grain," said Mrs. Heedy. "If we help the most needy and pay the rest without interest, we can get out of this situation. We'll also have to lower the land tax this year," said Holly. "Do you think we can do that? We still have to pay off the loan to the bank," reminded Mrs. Heedy. "We'll make part of the payment and ask for some time. Since we've always paid on time, I'm sure they'll give us an extension," replied Holly. Alexa walked into the room and loudly announced that the general from the police bureau had come in. "And why would a policeman show up at our door?" Miss Heedy wondered. "He spoke very fast, so I didn't understand anything. The only thing that became clear to me was that he was Japanese. I escorted him to the guest house. He's waiting for you there," Alexa replied. "I'll go and find out what he wants from us," said Holly, rising from her seat. "But he's a man. You can't be alone with him. Besides, he is Japanese. You know we're better off not associating with them. They have brought us a lot of trouble," Mrs. Heedy exclaimed. "Then I will go to him with Mr. Lionel. I apologize for coming to you unannounced. I am the head of the Police Bureau for Foreign Affairs. My name is Goichiro." The policeman introduced himself. "And what brings you here?" Holly asked. "You know, I like your town and your estate. There's a kind of special air here. The town is filled with beautiful houses, pottery, tea, people. By the way, the people here are especially beautiful," replied the policeman. "But you didn't come here to give us compliments. Tell us why you're here," asked Holly. "Well, since you insist, then I'll cut to the chase. Can you tell me where Mr. Carlos Heedy is now?" asked the policeman. "He is currently undergoing training in France," answered Holly. "Ah, France, an amazing country. Can you please tell me what specialty he is studying?" asked the policeman the next question. "I heard that he is studying philosophy," said Holly. "Philosophy, you say? I recently received a report from my people. It turns out that Carlos was spotted in Shanghai in the company of people my department is looking for. Do you know anything about that? Asked the policeman. That can't be true. We are firmly convinced that Carlos is in France, objected Holly. Well, since you say so, it must have been someone very much like him. And please answer me one more question. How long has he been abroad? 5 or 6 years? Asked the policeman. Okay, I won't torment you any more with my questions. I'll come to you sometime later, and it will be great if you take time for a cup of tea next time. So I'll see you later. Goodbye. Mr. Lionel, can you please get us what kind of firearm this is? Just a light one that even a girl can handle. It would be nice if it were a small gun that could be easily concealed. As little Noel rose to his feet, he began to relentlessly survey his surroundings. Gosh, I never thought my son would be so curious, Alexa exclaimed. Suddenly, some man walked over to the child and took him in his arms. Young Mr. Carlos is back, shouted Alexa. Long time no see, Holly, said Carlos. This is Alexa's son. Am I reading this right? He looks a lot like his mother. Carlos, it's you, whispered Holly. Why are you standing here on the sidelines? Come see what gifts the master has brought, said Alexa, walking up to Holly. He even brought a gift for my son Noel. He gave Madam a mink scarf. Still, our master is truly an amazing man. By the way, I'm sure he brought you a gift too. I haven't opened it yet, so I don't know what gift awaits me, Holly admitted. Well, as soon as you open it, be sure to show me, Alexa asked. Holly, take my present. After all, everyone got presents except you. I have absolutely no idea what's going on. He used to be so attached to you, and now he's left you without his attention, said Mrs. Heedy. It's okay. Don't worry about me. In addition, Carlos gave this gift to you. I can't accept it. Thank you for your concern, answered Holly. Since Holly couldn't sleep for a long time, she went out on the terrace. Holly heard someone's cautious footsteps. She thought it was Alexa and asked the one to go home where her husband and baby were waiting for her. It's not Alexa, it's me, said Carlos. Didn't anyone ever tell you not to sneak up on a girl at this late hour? Asked Holly. I won't be long. I have something for you, said Carlos and held out a small package to the girl. I can't accept a gift from you, said Holly. Take it or else I'll give it to the first person I see. And by the way, why don't you want to take the gift? Do you have some kind of grudge against me? Asked Carlos. No, I have no reason to resent you, replied the girl. You know, and I really wanted to see you. I noticed that you've lost a lot of weight. I want to admit to you that I missed you. I wanted to forget about you, but I couldn't. I'll leave a present on the terrace. Please accept it from me. Carlos placed the gift next to the girl and left for his room. When the girl opened the box, she saw a beautiful nightgown and a small bottle of perfume. Holly found Carlos in the guest house. He was listening to classical music. Did you like my present? Asked Carlos as soon as the girl crossed the threshold of the guest house. I would like to point out that perfume is very rare, even in France. Yes, I liked your gift very much. I should have mentioned it earlier, but I didn't have time, Holly replied. This perfume was invented by a woman. In the West, she is against the old covenants and the oppression of women. Carlos spoke in a calm, thoughtful tone. Exactly the same words were spoken by my late husband. Do you really think I'm old-fashioned too? Asked Holly. No, not at all. I just figured you could only gain your freedom by losing something. That's all, replied Carlos. I heard you opened a photography studio. I came here to tell you that your mother is very worried about you. You realize for yourself what turbulent times we live in, said Holly. But you're not going to back down from your scheme no matter what I tell you, am I right? Maybe this is the kind of freedom you so desire? Have you ever wondered how long peace will last in a quiet nest like our estate? Japan is at war with China. Europe is preparing for similar events, proclaimed Carlos. We don't know when our citizens will become mere cannon fodder. At the time, I didn't understand my brother's words. I thought he was a bastard who couldn't accept reality. But now I realize it all. There is no future for our youth. Being loyal to your home doesn't mean living. It means going into battle at any moment and dying on the battlefield. Is that why you organize the trading company? For the sake of freedom, you have to sell lands. But if you did that, the Japanese would suspect something. For the sake of hiding your real goal, you need an excuse to take the money overseas. Holly guessed. You've decided that the best option is trade. I know it hasn't brought you any income since a long time ago, so you understood my husband and decided to follow him again, didn't you? I'll try to explain to your mother about the photo studio. I'll find words that will put her at ease. And don't forget to come to dinner. Your mother is very worried about you. They say the youngest is never a match for the oldest, but looking at our Carlos, I realize he's becoming an exact copy of Gunnar, too, Alexa remarked. He's brought in a lot of Western things, too, and has become interested in photography. Madam, have you noticed how brave the girls of today are, after all? Today, many young girls from famous families have come to us. They want to take photography. And it also seems to me that in addition to photography, they want to capture Carlos's heart. I guess it's finally time for him to get married. Walking up to Carlos's office, Holly spotted Maya. Oh, hi. Didn't expect to see you here, Maya exclaimed upon noticing the girl. Why did you come unannounced? Carlos asked Holly. If you're busy, I can come another time, said Holly. Carlos asked Maya to step outside, leaving him and Holly alone. Your mother sent me to you with an important errand. Holly laid out 3 pictures of the girls in front of Carlos. You came all this long way to talk to me, so I will listen to you, said Carlos. You could see by the look on his face that he guessed what the conversation was going to be about, and he didn't like it. This lady is Mr. Franklin's daughter. She is studying piano at the Women's University. This girl is the daughter of a bank vice president, and this one works at the hospital, narrated Holly. Which one do you like the most? I would rather marry the one you choose for me, said Carlos. But it's not my marriage, it's yours, exclaimed Holly. But I don't care, so be it. Since there is no one here that I want as my wife, they are all just strangers to me. In a calm, unemotional voice, Carlos replied. Carlos, why do you say that? Holly asked. How could you just show up here and make my heart beat like that? How could you show me those pictures? Screamed Carlos, grabbing the girl's arm. And honestly, I don't care at all anymore that my feelings could be immoral. You have to hide. The Japanese are coming this way. A flustered Maya burst into the room. Carlos asked Holly to keep her quiet. Carlos led the girl into a secret room. What are the police officers doing in this humble photo studio? Maya asked as they entered. We got a tip that a rebel meeting was being held here, replied the policeman. Why don't you stop your search and help me button my dress? Be extremely careful, for this is a silk dress from France. I want to assure you that there are no rebels here. There are young gentlemen playing poker here every night, said Maya. And why are there pictures of women here on the table? The policeman asked. Maya answered them that this was a photo studio, and it was nothing strange to have pictures of people in the room. You smell nice. Did you use the perfume I gave you? Do you really want me to marry another woman? Carlos asked in a whisper. But you need to continue your family's lineage. Also in a whisper, Holly replied. Liar, you are lying to me now. Tell me you are lying to me now, please, asked Carlos. Carlos pulled the girl to him and kissed her on the lips. You are wearing the perfume I gave you. You look at me with a very gentle gaze, and yet you showed me pictures of other women. You are cruel, whispered Carlos. Mistress Holly is not well. She eats nothing and cries every night. She became like this after she visited your photography studio. Do you know what happened? Asked Alexa to Carlos. After Alexa's words, Carlos decided to check on his mother. I'm not going to ask you to come home every day. I just want to ask you to remember to eat right, said Mrs. Heidi to her son. Carlos could see that his mother was looking weaker and weaker every day. It was tearing his heart to pieces. She wants me to live a normal life, protecting what we have. She also wants me to live in peace with the people I love. Thought to himself, Carlos. Carlos, Holly isn't telling me anything, but I'm guessing what's really going on. I may be ignorant for intruding into your life, but I hope you take the path of least resistance, said Miss Hetty. I hope that eventually you marry a beautiful girl and you have a child of your own. Mom, I'm sorry, but I can't tell you that I will do exactly what you ask. Carlos mentally turned to his mother. He didn't want to tell her the truth so as not to upset her unnecessarily. Yes, I know you don't want to hear this. You're comfortable living in a world like this. It may seem humiliating, but it's just your mother's wishes, Mrs. Heidi went on to say. Carlos walked over to Holly's room and called her name quietly. The girl asked him to leave, not to disturb her unnecessarily. I came to see you to see how you were feeling. I'd like for a month. No, at least for a week or a day to be your man. If what I'm feeling is immoral and vicious, then I'll gladly accept the punishment. In a quiet voice, Carlos said, I intend to be punished with you. I don't want anything much from you. Having you by my side will already be enough, so please get well soon. Carlos left a bouquet of flowers and burgundy gloves made of soft leather outside the girl's bedroom. With a heavy heart, he returned to his photo studio. Mistress Holly, let's go quickly. They say the most famous courtesan is coming today. I hear they're having a photo shoot where she'll be wearing a dress from France. Where else will you see such a spectacle? Alexa exclaimed, and dragged Holly toward the photo studio. Mistress, you go ahead. I'm going to make a quick trip to the doctor's office and be right back. Holly walked up to the French photo studio building. She felt awkward going inside. Carlos, there's some girl standing at the gate. I think it's your sister-in-law, said Jay. It's hot outside today, so you better come inside, said Carlos, walking up to the girl. Holly nodded silently and walked into the photo studio. Where did Samantha go? We won't be able to get a picture if we keep this up. Unfortunately, this dress was smaller than we thought, so we'll have to find another model now, grumbled Maya, looking at the red dress. And where are we going to get another model on such short notice? This whole thing is making my head spin. I hope I'm not interrupting. Carlos is the one who brought me here, Holly exclaimed. Don't worry, I'll take her to the other room now, said Carlos. Wait, you don't need to take her anywhere. I just had an idea. Let's ask your sister-in-law to be our model, said Maya with a smirk. What are you talking about now? I've never modeled before. I wouldn't be any good at it, exclaimed Holly. It took over 2 months to get this dress delivered. If we order a new one, it will take forever, too. We can't keep putting off the release of our magazine. That's why we need a model now, Maya insisted. No, that's not a good idea. We need to find another model, said Carlos. Suddenly, the sound of a police siren was heard outside the door. I'll leave it all up to you, Maya. Do what you see fit, said Carlos and disappeared into a secret room. A moment later, a crowd of police officers burst into the studio. We want Mr. Carlos Heedy, shouted one of the policemen. And what is your reason for coming to us? Asked Maya with a sweet smile. The policeman walked up to Maya and swung his hand across her face. Holly covered her mouth with her hands to keep from screaming. Find him, ordered the policeman. After a few minutes of searching, the police officers found the secret room where Carlos was hiding. Fortunately, the room turned out to be empty. Holly stared in wonder at the empty room. Where had Carlos gone? Maya looked at the police officers with a chuckle. She knew they wouldn't find Carlos even if they wanted to so badly. French photo studio? A shoot for a magazine? You think we're going to buy into such a farce? Tell Mr. Heady that we'll be sure to catch him red-handed soon, shouted the policeman. A month passed after this incident, but Carlos never returned. He disappeared in an unknown direction. What happened to the photo studio? Holly asked Alexa. The girl answered her that all the studio employees had scattered and gone into hiding. Accusations continued to surface that the place was a rebel base. I heard that as soon as they are caught, whether they have proof or not, they will be sent straight to jail, said Alexa. Since Holly couldn't sleep for days on end, she went to the garden to calm her nerves. Behind her, Holly heard Carlos's quiet voice. The man called the girl's name. Holly ran up to Carlos and kissed him on the lips. Let's run away from here, suggested Carlos to the girl. You told me you wanted to live just one day as my man. I want that too. At least for just one night, I don't want to be anyone's daughter-in-law or widow. I just want to be free Holly by your side, the girl whispered. This is a new train that will take you right to where you want to go. Are you sure you'll be all right? Isn't it dangerous to go there on your own? Mr. Lionel asked the girls. Ah, stop worrying. Miss Holly is finally allowed to go home to her family. I'll just walk her out, replied Alexa in a carefree voice. Alexa walked her mistress to the train station with her head bowed low. She was afraid to let the girl go alone. You'll be back, won't you, mistress? Asked Alexa, who had been silent until then. How can I leave and not come back when my sick mother is waiting for me at home? Even if I go to the ends of the earth, I'm still the daughter-in-law of the Heidi family, Holly replied. I will wait for you, mistress, and I beg you, love him so much that you don't have any regrets and don't think too much. Constant thoughts in your head are your weakness, Alexa exclaimed. As they got off the train, Alexa saw Carlos in front of her. She remembered Alexa's words. He must be loved so much that there was no more doubt. I thought you weren't coming, said Carlos, and gently took the girl's hands. But I'm here, I came, replied Holly. Carlos led Holly to a stately two-story house. This is the villa of a millionaire who is known for his pro-Japanese stance. That's why it's so well hidden from prying eyes. This man's son shares the same ideology as me, said Carlos. Carlos decided to show Holly his favorite spot in the garden. It was located on the shore of a small lake. Holly, is it possible that I am so desperate that I think everything that is happening at the moment is just a dream? Carlos asked. Why don't you make sure it's all real then? Holly answered with a question. Carlos decided to take the girl's advice. He kissed her gently on the lips. Carlos and Holly cuddled together, sitting on the couch, silently watching the flames of the fire in the fireplace. While we're here, I want to be different. I don't want to be Holly Hetty, the daughter-in-law of the Hetty family. I want to be a different person. I want to laugh and just talk about nothing like other women, Holly said in a quiet voice. But the woman I love is you. Why do you say you want to be different? Carlos asked, kissing the girl on the temple. And I want to be another mademoiselle, Holly admitted. I'm even curious now myself what you would be like as a mademoiselle, said Carlos. Right now, I'm too tired to be a mademoiselle or the sister-in-law of the Heidi family. I'm just Holly, an ordinary person. And you, Carlos, are like the spring sunshine. I think you've been resting in the sun too much. That's why you give off such warmth, Carlos whispered in the girl's ear. Holly put on the nightgown Carlos had given her when he came home from France. Alexa put it down for me, so I put it on. And by the way, this is the first time I've ever looked at myself in such a big mirror. I'm embarrassed to see myself looking like this, thought Holly, looking at her reflection in the mirror. Are you ready? Let's go to breakfast, said Carlos, entering the room. The girl covered herself with her hands in embarrassment. Isn't that the nightgown I gave you? Asked Carlos. It looks more like underwear than clothes. Embarrassed, Holly muttered. The girl's face turned crimson red from embarrassment. Let me help you dress like a real mademoiselle. It's called a stocking girdle, well, or garters. You wanted to be different. These clothes will change you. Tonight you will be Mademoiselle Holly, said Carlos. And I thought you didn't want me to be your model, said Holly. She felt like a real mademoiselle in her hat and bright red dress. That was then. It's different now. I want to keep something to remind me of those events. But you don't have to do that if you don't want to, replied Carlos. I want to do it, said Holly in a confident tone. Holly stood in front of the camera. A clicking sound was heard. It's not stopping raining, Carlos remarked. I feel like it's been raining since you and I got in the accident, said Holly. Carlos leaned over the girl and kissed her on the lips. And who did you just kiss? Clarified Holly. How about you? Who did you kiss? Carlos answered with a question. I don't understand where I get all these feelings from at all. I don't know who they belong to, Holly Foot or Holly Brown, mumbled the girl. If you decide to be Holly Foot, I'll be Carlos Hiri to you. Carlos exclaimed and squeezed the girl's shoulders tightly. But is it that simple? Holly asked. It's rainy now, just like the day you and I spent together. Carlos put his arm around the girl's shoulders and pulled her close to him. Do you remember our last day together? I only remembered taking pictures with you. I have absolutely no memory of what happened later, Holly admitted. It was raining early in the morning, and then our paths parted. You went home, and I left for Hawaii. We never saw each other again after that," Carlos said in a quiet voice. Suddenly, tears shot down the girl's cheeks. She was sorry that such a beautiful love story had ended so quickly. Carlos put his arms around the girl and pulled her close to him. "Holly Foote died after that? Is that why I don't remember anything else?" asked the girl. "Yes, she died in an accident," replied Carlos. "That's not fair. I was reborn only to be killed again in an accident. I wonder why exactly is this happening to me?" exclaimed Holly. Suddenly, Holly had the feeling that the man sitting across from her was about to disappear. "No, I'm begging you! Don't go away! Don't disappear! Don't leave me alone!" screamed Holly. "I won't disappear, don't worry. I'll always be here." Carlos took Holly's hand and put it to the girl's heart. Carlos then turned back into mist and vanished into thin air in the blink of an eye. Holly Brown opened her eyes. Next to her bed, she saw her worried relatives. "Holly, you're finally awake!" Mrs. Brown shouted joyfully. "I'm back in Holly Brown's body again," the girl thought to herself. "Mommy, can you tell me what happened to me?" the girl asked. "Another patient had brain death, so you had a heart transplant," replied Mrs. Brown. "There were a lot of people on the waiting list. You might not have gotten that heart, but since your father was once a donor himself, you were a priority, so you were chosen." Aiden explained. "Does that mean Carlos is gone after giving me his heart?" Holly thought sadly. Tears flowed from the girl's eyes. "Don't cry, honey. It's okay. You're alive, and that's what matters," Mrs. Brown said to her daughter. "Will you do one favor for me? That last poem you sent me, can I hear it from you?" asked Holly. "I've already forgotten it," said Carlos. The girl answered him that she had brought the poem with her. "How about next time? Today I just want to enjoy talking to you. And to be honest, I don't really care about poems at all right now," Carlos admitted. "I believe we don't need to cry anymore. Let's take these last moments to smile at each other," asked Holly. The girl saw that tears were again appearing on Carlos's face. "I beg you, don't cry, smile," whispered Holly. Tears came to the girl's eyes as well. Carlos stood in front of the girl, not knowing what to say to her goodbye. "Have a long and happy life, okay? Promise me that," Holly asked. Carlos knew that if he said a word, he would cry again, so he just nodded silently. "I've heard that butterflies symbolize reincarnation. We'll definitely see you again. I promise." Holly handed Carlos a white handkerchief with a butterfly embroidered in gold thread. "How was the trip? Did it go well? Are your parents healthy?" Mrs. Hetty asked. "Yes," Holly answered briefly. "Everything that isn't done is for the best. I'm glad Carlos is finally gone. I was afraid that if he stayed here, he would end up like his brother. I'm glad he decided to continue studying," Mrs. Hetty exclaimed. Holly guessed that Mrs. Hetty knew about her relationship with Carlos. She just didn't want to talk about it. "Mrs. Hetty, there's been a disaster! Carlos has been arrested!" shouted Mr. Lionel, who burst into the office. Miss Hetty grabbed her head and fainted. "How did it go?" Holly asked Mr. Lionel. They had returned from the police station a few minutes ago. "We were told that no visits are allowed. He's guilty of crimes of particular gravity," said the lawyer standing next to Mr. Lionel. "They say he kept weapons and tried to take money out of the country to support the rebels. And they also claim that his journal with rebel ideas is a betrayal of the state," said Mr. Lionel. "Out of the blue, they claim such a thing. It is a favorite universal accusation from the Japanese. It's their weapon for capturing intellectuals and youth," thought to herself Holly. "They blatantly stated that the State Police Bureau was waiting for a chance to catch him. They claim it was the initiative of the head of the Foreign Affairs Department," said Mr. Lionel. "Madam, I have relatives working at the station. We will give them a small bribe. It will help us to see him." The next day, Mr. Lionel came with bad news. They had managed to see Carlos after all. He was badly beaten. "So what do we do now?" asked Alexa. "I'm going to visit him in person," exclaimed Holly, jumping up from her seat. "And here we meet again," said the head of the Police Foreign Affairs Bureau, Goichiro, with a smile. "Explain to us why we're not allowed to visit Carlos Hetty?" asked Holly. Because of crimes of particular gravity, he was found in possession of weapons, explosives. He set up a fake trading company and transferred money to foreign invaders. He also tried to publish a lewd magazine, said the policeman. Who knows? Maybe he'll pull something else with someone else's help. Do you have any proof? Asked the girl. The policeman ordered to bring a witness. She turned out to be Maya. If I remember correctly, you know her, said the policeman. No, I don't know her, Holly replied. And rightly so. Because who knows what would have happened to you if you had known her? She was the link between Carlos and Shanghai, said the policeman, and asked him to take Maya away. He also asked Lionel to leave. He wanted to talk to Holly alone. The girl you saw is called Maya. She confessed everything. And even if you find the best lawyer, Carlos, in front of me, we'll only see the light at the end of the tunnel, whispered the policeman in Holly's ear. Once the trial starts, Carlos will be out of my reach, and there's nothing I can do about it. What do you want? Asked Holly. The policeman leaned over the girl and whispered something in her ear again. How dare you? Shouted a blushing Holly. I don't want anything. I only wish for the welfare of the Japanese Empire, said the policeman and smiled bloodthirstily. Let's bury her even without her son present. How can this be done? Neither the bureau nor the police station even lifted a finger. Alexa was indignant. Holly had tried to bribe the head of the police bureau for foreign affairs, Goichiro, with the help of other people, but he had only insisted that she communicate with him personally. The girl was not deterred by this. She decided to go all the way. We won't pay the debt to the bank anymore, said Holly in a firm, confident tone. What do you mean by that? Mr. Lionel clarified. We got a lot more than the collateral given, so it's not a strong loss. Give some of the land to relatives and sell the rest and buy gold. Anything that wasn't collateral, divide equally among the farmers, ordered Holly. Please do it quickly and quietly. We have too little time left. I understand exactly why you are doing this, and I think Mrs. Hetty would agree with you. Carlos is almost impossible to get out of jail. That policeman isn't going to buy a couple of simple trinkets, said Mr. Lionel. The policeman is bound to want the whole house. But where will you go? Don't worry about me. I have some money left by my parents. I plan to return to the suburbs soon, answered Holly. I'm sorry you had to come all the way to this miserable place, said the head of the police bureau for overseas affairs, Goichiro. Earlier you mentioned our estate's stunning houses, pottery and tea, said Holly. She held out a small envelope to the policeman. The policeman concealed the envelope and looked through the papers lying in it. You have a bad memory, ma'am. I noticed that day that your estate has amazing houses, pottery, tea, and people, said the policeman. Holly realized from the look in his eyes that he wouldn't stop until he got his way. Carlos was beyond saving.